Dr. Angelina Dayton. I'm his business with Charlotte and her son and 2 of our homeschooled students. And in my culture, the old women used to introduce themselves to a group of people by saying, so there's my introduction. We didn't have a whole lot of language. They kind of sat in the back and let you know that they recognized you. This is a learning experience for all of us. Some of us, this is the first time presenting, so we're going to have fun with this and see it as learning and not perfection. So let's have fun, okay? Now, our homeschool students are going to start by introducing themselves and teaching you 2 new words, repatriation and rematriation, and they're going to do this by acting out a skit. So first, introduce yourself, ladies. And they are going to stand in front here so everybody can see them. And they're going to do a little skit to introduce the concept of repatriation. A lot of you know NAGPRA and the repatriation of artifacts, so they're going to act this out for you. Very loud. Huh?
Excuse me, Mrs. Native Mother. We have determined that you are not capable of taking care of this. We have decided to take it to our institution called a museum to make sure it is taken care of.
Come. My people and I are capable of taking care of this. We are taking it back.
Repatriation of an item. Now we're going to introduce the concept of rematriation of the education of our children. Rematriation. Patriation, kind of patriarchal. Matriation, maybe a little bit more feminine. And so now they're going to act out the idea of rematriation for you. A little bit louder, too, make sure they can hear you. Whenever he doesn't cry, make sure he doesn't cry.
Excuse me, Mrs. Native Mother. We have determined that you are not capable of taking care of this. We have decided to take it to our institution called a school to make sure it is taken care of.
My people and I are capable of taking care of things. We are taking it back.
Thank you. Very good, ladies. Very good. So today we're going to talk a little bit about this idea of rematriation of the education of Native children. And so our study today specifically focuses on homeschooling, which was spoken about by our previous speaker. And we're going to be echoing a lot of the same sentiments. We're here to say, yeah, she was right on in everything she said. And to talk a little bit more about that kind of very not often used practice of homeschooling our children. And so let me tell you a little bit about homeschooling. Homeschooling is the fastest growing form of education within the United States. So right now there's about 2 million children within the United States that are homeschooled, but only 15% of them are non-white. So guess how many of that 15% are probably Native? So little they don't even have a number. So what is homeschooling and who homeschools? Okay, so the idea of homeschooling is sometimes seen as parent-led, home-based education. But we're going to take a little bit of an indigenous twist on that and say that it's community-led, culturally based education. So there's always this concept of unilateral, one-way, directional teaching and learning, and we're saying that it's way more dynamic than that, the concept of homeschooling. Lots of people homeschool. Atheists, Catholics, liberals, conservatives, people with a lot of education, people with very little education, people who are very, very rich, people who are very, very poor. So there's not like a type of person that homeschools. But when they do homeschool, let me tell you what happens. Their children tend to score higher on standardized tests. They tend to score above average on ACTs and SATs. There's this huge growing movement within colleges now where they're recruiting homeschoolers because they know that they're more likely to succeed. You're more likely to vote. You're more likely to do community service. So this is something to look into. I don't really want to get into what may be wrong with what we call traditional schooling, But you may want to look up Oklahoma's ranking if any of you guys are interested. So our research is very small and just getting started because we're trying to identify those native homeschoolers that are in that 15%. And we're looking at chronicling the story of these native mothers who have decided to take on this very courageous act of saying, I'm going to rematriate the education of my child. And so it's hard to call it school, because school, when you think of school, you know what you think of. You think of something like this, right? There's a desk, there's a clock. This is NSU, I guess they don't use clocks here. But there's normally a clock. There's very scheduled timing of when things occur. So a lot of people will come into our homeschool environment and say, oh, when does this learning happen? Don't you have a schedule on when things happen? And we say, let me explain to you how education used to be before schools. So when we talk about homeschooling, we're really talking about the rematriation of education. And as we talk about this, and Charlotte's going to talk a little bit more, I want you to kind of put out of your mind the idea of school and all those visceral responses that you get of what school is and what teaching and learning is as this one thing and this other thing and these two things going at each other. And I want you to play with these ideas in your head, okay? Playing is learning, okay? Participating in a culturally based practice like stomp dancing is learning, all right? Washing dishes, my children might disagree, that's learning. Living is learning. So there's, just like the speaker before us talked about, in everything that we do, there's an opportunity to learn. Math, language, science, history. And it used to be that that's how we learned, was from our mothers, all of these things, and from our communities. And so I want us to try and get back into that frame of mind again, so this idea of homeschooling won't seem so dramatic or controversial. Here's something else. When we think of school, we think of what? Certification, credentialing, right? Let's play with the concept that some knowledge can't be certified. It can't be credentialed. But that's learning too. So there's been an experience where one of the greatest teachers in our homeschool was not allowed to give a seminar here at NSU because he wasn't credentialed. And the argument was made, you can't credential what this man knows. But he can definitely come teach at our homeschool. We consider him completely certifiable in a lot of ways. Learning is unscheduled. There's such a thing as unscheduled learning. That means it doesn't happen at 8 o'clock. Now, my family and I lived down in Guatemala for a while, and we attended school in a small Mayan village. And school started when the teachers got there. And if you had to leave and go cut wood, you left and then you came back. My children were so mad when we had to come back to the United States. But this idea of unscheduled learning really fit with the way that they wanted to learn, the way that they retained. So unscheduled learning, spontaneous learning. Oh my gosh, I didn't know I'm in a learning environment right now, but I am. Unexpected learning. I didn't know that was going to teach me something. I guess I'm not going to touch that stove again. But I've learned something. And these ways of learning are incredibly effective and efficient. So a lot of people will say there's not a lot of structure here. You can't possibly be effective and efficient within a home environment because there's not a bell, there's not a clock, and you don't have a curriculum laid out every single day for every moment of how you're going to learn something. What exactly are you going to do at the stomp ground between 8 and 10 o'clock so that you meet some sort of objective? Well, first of all, we don't go 8 to 10 o'clock. Brad told us that today. We start late on time, late on purpose. It's not so structured. That learning doesn't happen in a very structured way. Now, I have 7 children who I've homeschooled on and off, depending on where we lived and what we were doing. And so they will all testify that washing dishes is learning, that in everything that we did every day it was learning, that there was an opportunity if we were living in Guatemala to learn Tutujil, to learn Spanish. We're here in Cherokee Nation. My husband's a Cherokee citizen, but we learn Cherokee. In California, you learn Spanish too. If you go to New Mexico, you learn Spanish. If you go to Arizona, you learn Spanish. There's always an opportunity to learn Spanish in the Southwest. My 22-year-old now is a cognitive scientist student at UC San Diego. She sits on the board of the American Physician Scientist Association, and she studies brain plasticity. She will say homeschooling helped her with all of that. My other daughter studies applied mathematics at UC Berkeley. My other daughter graduated high school at 16. She's in her second year of college. The youngest 4 travel with me, and they study culture, they study art, they study language. My son, who's 8 years old, has a YouTube account and followers, subscribers. He's better at computers than his mother. He said that to make sure if you would follow him on YouTube, because he likes to get subscribers. So I said I'd mention that in the talk. And the 4-year-old, my youngest, goes to the Cherokee immersion. So depending on what we needed, we used the home environment as a sufficient alternative. And I want us to keep that in mind as we move forward, okay? Lots of people would say, well, it's easy for you to homeschool because you're educated. You have your doctorate. I have my doctorate in education, so it's not brave of you to do this. I mean, this is kind of like your job. But I hope I don't look so old as for you to think that my 22-year-old, that I had her after I had my PhD. I was actually 18 when I had her, and I got my PhD when she was 17. So she didn't have a mother with a PhD teaching her. She had a young mother who was interested in teaching her as the mother learned, and who drew upon the extended network of people in my community to help her learn. So anybody, and this is my transition now to Charlotte, there is nothing a mother can't teach her child. Nothing, because she never teaches anything alone. Always, always, there's an extended network there as a resource to her. And it's the belief that a child doesn't learn alone, that's the rematriation. That's okay. I don't have to send her over there. I have sufficient here in my community in order to teach her. Is it a radical belief that communities can grow and sustain their language and culture together, and that this act alone can provide a child and community with education? I don't think so. So now Charlotte's going to speak a little bit more about what we're trying to gather together in our research. So, Charlotte?
Our research focuses on primary teachers of the mothers to teach their native children. We are looking at studying mothers who choose to forego these 3 concepts: Western approaches to learning, formal assessments, and standardized curriculum. I have chosen to forego these 3 things by homeschooling my child. My experience choosing to homeschool my child is an example of what happens when a Native mother experiences the rematriation of the education of her child. Upon withdrawing my child from public schools, I was approached by the school principal. He gave the signature to withdraw my child from school. He proceeded to walk off. He took a few steps. He hesitated, stopped, turned around. And he said, I'm not sure if you're aware, but when you decide to homeschool your child and withdraw her from school, when it comes time to put your child back into public schools, she's subjected to a standardized testing, a placement test. And whatever grade she's currently in, if she happens to not hit the placement marks, then she could be obligated to be held back to that grade she's in. Furthermore, he went on to say that if she tested lower than the grade she was in, that they had the option of placing her back a few years, depending on the scores. And so at that moment, I was already undermined. He already undermined my abilities. And so I looked at him and I said, okay, I think I understand. So she could test lower and be placed in a lower grade, but she could also test higher and be placed in a higher grade. She could skip some grades, am I correct? And with an undoubting voice, yeah. And so I just simply smiled at him, turned to my child and said, no jump. in our language. Are you ready? And so I took her hand and we walked out of the school, and that was my last experience with the public school. These are the types of stories we're looking to chronicle. Mothers like me who have a vision that a mother and her community are sufficient to educate their children. We're collecting data on other mothers that teach through cultural revitalization, like stomp dancing, gardening, arts and crafts, hunting, visiting with elders, with their families. When we accept that learning is something that happens in and with the communities through natural, cultural, supported experiences, then we can experience inequality, scarcity. We are rising it up together, all the way into the future. For example, a mother can speak her language to her child, and if she is not fluent, then that's the opportunity for her to learn with her child. That's when I take my child out to the elders, out to the ceremonial grounds, out into the community, out into the cultural activities. I learn with my child. That we grow together. We raise each other up. And by setting that tone, then she realizes that's she can do the same thing. It doesn't have to be 1 + 2. And so that's how we experience these things. And in this way, we raise up our language together all the way into the future. Ina Saladin Sting. We are raising it up together all the way into the future. This is the idea we wanted to explore in our research. Right now, we're just getting started, but we would like to share that with others. Bordeaux.
Thank you. We have 10 minutes for questions or discussion. Questions? Yes.
You were talking earlier about placement and the conversation with the superintendent. And I remember, although I'm probably older than most of the people here, that when I went to, my dad was in the military, so one of the schools that I went to was a very small country school in which there were 3 grades in one classroom. So the teacher taught 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade was all in one room. So the 2nd grade had 5 students, the 3rd grade had 4, or whatever the case may be. It was just a small number of students. So when you finished your work, your 2nd grade work, you could move over to the chair and do the 3rd grade work. And then if you finished, they would move you ahead to the next grade at the end of the year. And I think later on in the 80s, they called that the open classroom concept, but it was actually begun much earlier than that. But I love that concept of learning.
I think that in the homeschool environment, depending on which mothers bring their children at any day to participate in the space that we have or wherever we are, you'll find that the children gravitate towards that thing that they're most interested in. And so my 8-year-old son teaches computers to the 14-year-olds because they naturally gravitate towards the things that they're interested in. And so that idea of gradation is actually a really new concept. And in a community, usually the longer you do something, the better you get at it. But I could do art for 100 years, and Charlotte's still going to be better at it than me. And so, the idea is that learning is more like an orchestra. There's a whole lot of players, and they all contribute uniquely to something that becomes beautiful. It's not like we used to say, your head's empty, I pour this in, now you're smart. But something that's much more organic and dynamic in what happens. And so, so you wouldn't be able to say that person's in 3rd grade. You'd be able to say this person's learning this, and this person's helping and learning with them. So it's much more of a dance than a structure.
Because each child has a different way of learning.
And a different way of learning.
Yes.
And we also try to utilize our children in teaching each other. So my 12-year-old, who was just in the play, She may have the knowledge to teach the other children how to shake shells in our ceremonial dances or the culture that goes with it. You know, and we have different strengths of the different kids, and we rely on them to teach the other kids. So unfortunately, or often, I guess, kids learn better from other kids.
Yes, they do.
And so that's kind of what we lean towards. We allow each of our kids to find their strength. And then we try to build them on their strength, and we allow them to build up the others, whether they're younger or older.
Any faculty member in here will tell you that the best way to learn something is to teach it. We learn so much more the moment we open our mouth and try to explain to somebody else what it is we say we know. And they're always teaching each other. And building community, because we're raising it up together all the way into the future.
You know, it's all I think scares me.
Yeah.
Raise it up together to the future.
Your son has very much a role in technology. My question is, do you think there is a major role for technology?
In language preservation, I think yes. One of the things he's doing, he does a lot of video gaming stuff, so most of his channel is how to build something on Minecraft. But he also, for those that are further away, he can make a YouTube video if they ask him a question like, how do you say this in Cherokee? Just put it on YouTube and then say, and then that 15-second video is there for one of his subscribers to look at, because then they get views, and don't you know that's what it's all about, Mom? So I wasn't aware of this, but apparently so. So I think that the younger children especially are utilizing that technology to have instantaneous information for the things that they're curious about. And since they're curious about culture, they're curious about language, they're curious about a lot of things, they're Googling something. And if it's in Cherokee, or it's able to be accessed, or we're able to go to the Cherokee.org webpage or whatever, they're finding it, they're utilizing it, and they're learning from it on their own because they're savvy. They send Facebook posts to each other. We have a Facebook page for our homeschool that they help us update. And so people can share ideas. They can say, this is what's happening over here. Or, Mom, I found a driving trail for the Trail of Tears, so when we go back to North Carolina, let's take this and stop at these places. And this hotel has a pool, that's where we're going to stay, and they plan the trip, right? And so they're able to explore their history, their culture, and their language through technology in an instantaneous fashion. And that's how they like to learn. They don't like to be bored.
It's like sticking a barrier in cubicle, with our Native children.
Yeah.
In some instances. And so, touching back on the technology, I would like to bring it back to balance. We also try to balance that. So we don't limit them on the computer use, but we find other opportunities to teach them. So we participate in our ceremonial aspects of it, and so then they know that whenever we go up to our ceremonial grounds for the weekends, no technology. It's stuck at home. So that's also their teaching tool as well. So they're coming up to the ceremonial grounds, and they're learning what the roles are supposed to be. They're learning the language from the other elders that are speaking it.
And they're running around and playing in dirt. Just playing in dirt and playing with sticks and getting outside and not in a classroom and not in front of a computer. And they're learning how to make things, and they're learning to sit quietly when elders talk and things like that.
To get up when an elder comes into the room. That's one of the things that we see as a decline, is our children, when we go anywhere, one of the first things they're trying to do is they're looking for a chair. Where can I go sit down?
And they're trying to grab our iPhones to...
Yeah. And so one of my biggest pet peeves within my kids, and I try to teach, if you're sitting down and there's an elder standing up, that's a problem. We need to fix that. You give your respects and stand up and encourage, not ask them. Don't ask them, do you want to sit down? Encourage them. Here, have a seat. It's all how you correspond with your elders. If you're going to ask them, we were taught that you do ask your elders for knowledge, but when things are like that, you encourage them. Here, have this seat. You don't ask them, you encourage them.
And we have the opportunity to do that now because the children are with us all the time. And we had spoken previously about how we're constantly bombarded with the English language in all of our media, but we're also constantly bombarded with this culture that teaches us, our children, something different sometimes than what we would like to have them practice. And so taking them out of the electronic age where they're constantly bombarded and taking them back into our homes, not constantly in school, back into our ceremonial grounds is a way to, and somebody else had asked the question, to couple us learning our culture and our language and our beliefs and our spirituality all together in a way that's more uniform and less segregated. So.
Yes, one more question. Right.
I just had a question. Do you think that the cultural homeschooling environment is a much more better learning experience for a child than maybe the structured style that we're brought up in? As an education major, I was just curious.
So, like I had mentioned previously, my children didn't always homeschool. There were times when, I always say as a teacher, I don't teach math, I don't teach science, I don't teach English, I teach children. So I get to know the child, and then what the child may want or feel like they need at the moment is where I place them. And right now, the ones that are home, the 3 older ones that are home, homeschooling is what's best for them. When we went to Guatemala, one of the children attended a Catholic school and learned Spanish in Zutu Hill, and the other ones ran around the jungle the whole time. And so, better is tricky. It's tricky. I mean, each school is different. Each teacher is different. Each child is different. So I would say there are definite advantages to homeschooling a child in a culturally appropriate environment if you're looking to revitalize or retain certain parts of your culture for the benefit of your family and your community. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay.
One more quick question.
It's kind of a question and an answer. I just happened to be with one of her youngest children last night, and she was helping Grandpa fold clothes. Grandpa would pick up a pair of pants and say, "What color is this?" in the chair. She would say, "You got it. Red." And he'd be looking and he'd say, "What color is this?" She's learning that at a young age. She'll know all that. Yeah, she's 3 now, and she's got most of that there.
And the last thing
I think that's where the community support
Yes.
comes in. If Grandpa adds a little bit, and Uncle Harry adds some, then you got an educational environment. With that,
I think that what we're doing is we're taking the courage to say that complete fluency is not necessary, but and we can't always provide complete and total immersion. We can't. But what we're doing is saying we have the courage to start this and provide what we can for our children because we believe that we're sufficient. We're more than sufficient. From our standards, we can provide everything our children need, and that seems to be a radical idea that mothers can provide everything that a child needs. And I don't think it's radical. I think it's absolutely appropriate, and I have confidence in us, and we're looking for other mothers that have that confidence to be a little, what others might seem a little bit radical, so that we can chronicle their stories of principals who have interactions that might make somebody afraid to do this in the future, or the things that they've learned that work and the things that they learned that didn't work. So little by little, the color of a pair of pants, little by little, with the courage to keep moving forward, because we're building it up together all the way into the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We're done.